All right, welcome to the last regular season edition of the Goodman Hummel podcast. I'm Jeff Goodman. He's Rob Hummel, and it's over, Rob. You're back home, and you watch your boys from Valpo win the national title. Scott Drew, is it surreal? I mean, you grew up following Scott Drew and Homer and Bryce. Is it surreal? Can you believe that Baylor won the national championship?
No, only because, and it's not really a Valpo thing. It's more of I remember when he left Valpo as the head coach to go to Baylor, and they just had a player murder another player. That's how do you come back from that? And I think they certainly had some struggles, and the penalties they received were with what happened, that's fair. But for a guy coming in, it's amazing the way that he's turned the program around. And I mean, their team, if they don't get COVID this year, we could be talking about them as an undefeated team. 100%. I really believe that. They were rolling. I saw them in person in January, and their depth was so elite. They have elite guard play. Scott Drew is a really good coach, and I don't think that people maybe have given him credit for that. And there's been a lot of stories written about that. As this is kind of matriculated into them being a really good team this year. But yeah, I'm definitely proud. I mean, the job that Homer Drew did at Valpo was incredible. Bryce was so well known as a big time player and making an iconic shot in the NCAA tournament. But Scott was a big part of that. Scott was the one that was going out and recruiting, and he was a huge part of his dad's staff. So I'm certainly proud in that regard, but they certainly deserve it. And a lot of those kids came back this year because of last year. Right. Get an opportunity. I feel bad for, and I saw him at the 3x3U stuff because he played, was Devontae Bandu.
Yeah.
Him and Freddie
Gillespie. What about Freddie Gillespie?
Totally. Both those dudes. I feel bad that, they just didn't get an opportunity. But what a performance. It was really a beatdown, and they proved that they are, the class of college basketball this year.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I picked Baylor to win it all before the season, before the tournament. I'm going to, because I get enough wrong, but I didn't think it would go like it went last night. Let's face it. Nobody thought it would be that dominating. But early on, Rob, I don't know if you felt the same way. First 4 minutes, it was whoa, okay. The athleticism, the toughness, the tenacity, the defense. That was the part that blew me away, Rob, right away of all right, and Suggs picked up 2 quick fouls, but I'm not even sure it would have mattered. Jalen Suggs wasn't getting by dudes. And if he was, they had great help defense all the time, all night.
Yeah, no, they understand their roles. You have big time perimeter defenders in T, Davion Mitchell, and Jared Butler. You don't necessarily overreact to getting blown by because you've got Flo Thamba and you've got Jonathan Chamachachua, and you play a guy like Mark Vital, who is probably the best role player in college basketball this year. I mean, without a doubt.
He was awesome.
You get 11 boards. I mean, you can play him at the 5, play him at the 4. You can switch 5 ways.
He can guard 1 through 5. I mean,
you can totally switch 5 ways if he's playing the 5. He's, what is he, 6'5"?
I just love how you hear it on people and they say, well, he can guard 1 through 5, right? And you're like, no, he can't. Most guys
Vital can.
That's bullshit. With Vital, he can legitimately guard 1 through 5.
Totally. But you're right. You could see that the physicality of the bigs certainly affected Drew Timme. I think that we saw, and I think you might have even tweeted this, Jonathan Chamachachua, pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Big John.
Yep.
He was really good.
Because he
was have so many pieces. I'm telling you, Matt Meyer starts for 99.9% of college programs.
Yeah.
And that dude played 12 minutes last night.
They didn't need him at all.
He could play in the NBA.
Right.
He had 2 points last night. I mean, when you watch him in warm-ups and he's going off 1 foot and cocking it back to his shoulder, and just how talented he is.
I do feel bad, Rob.
Really good.
I feel bad because, like you said, I do feel like if they had never gotten COVID, this is a team that could have gone down and they could have been playing each other, both undefeated.
We're undefeated too.
And then,
I agree.
Then it's okay. Baylor is one of the greatest teams in in college basketball history. And now people aren't going to say that because they had 2 losses. Well, they had 2 losses in a COVID year, of which one came days after coming back from a 3-week pause.
And they had guys who had it. It wasn't like they just got contact traced. They had dudes that actually got sick. So and you think about it, your losses are at Kansas, and I know it's not the same, Fog Allen, but who in the Big 12 has not lost there in seasons where they've been really good? And then you lose in the Big 12 tournament to Oklahoma State, who was playing really well.
Right, the number 1 player in the country. And again, I don't think Jared, 2 players that I thought seemed to be affected more than anybody were again, Everyday John was not himself until the NCAA tournament, and their defense wasn't. Yeah. And Scott Drew said it, like, we didn't have a chance to practice after coming back from COVID because they played right away against Iowa State, played against Kansas. There were just too many games stacked up upon each other that they really never had a chance. So I think losing earlier than expected in the Big 12 tournament, I think it helped them. I think they went home. They could regroup. They can kind of get focused on getting their defense back. And, man, these last 2 games, Rob, were about as dominant of a performance as I can remember. I mean, against Houston, it wasn't even a game, right? I mean, it was a complete beatdown. And against Gonzaga, the team that everybody was ready to write the stories. I mean, you don't know how many of my media friends were ready to write the stories, Jeff Borzello, about Gonzaga being, one of the greatest teams ever. Where do they stack up? And I'm like, yeah, I think Baylor's a better team here. I do.
Now, Baylor's depth is what stands out to me. We just kind of talked about that with Meyer and Flagler. And with Gonzaga, you get off to a bad start. One of your best players gets in foul trouble. Corey Kispert doesn't shoot it well. And doesn't really – I felt like he didn't have great looks. I didn't feel like he ever really got good looks at the basket. Drew Timme gets slowed down. It was just – you get punched in the mouth like that immediately. And it wasn't just a punch. Like, they knocked Gonzaga out in the first.
So, Rob, when that has happened to you, give me an example of when you went out there with a good Purdue team and you knew the other team was better. What are you thinking early on? Or even when you go out there in 3-on-3?
I have a great example from Purdue. Duke, Big Ten AC Challenge 2009. Like, it was such a hype game. We're like, 6. They're like 4. They're bringing in a team that the next year will win the national championship. So it's John Shire, Gerald Henderson, Brian Zubek, Lance Thomas, Kyle Singler. I mean, really good team. Like, really good team. Paulus is off the bench. Was
Nolan on that team? Wasn't Nolan on that?
Nolan was on the team. Yeah. Yep. Nolan was there. So they had a bunch of guys. And I have never – part of this was Duke. Part of this was the atmosphere. And honestly, it helped us down the road because I thought that it helped us win games the next year from being in this situation. But when you come out to warm up before the game starts with an hour pregame and it's full, and like the buzz in the arena is like – I mean, we get off to such a bad start. I missed like a point-blank layup. We're down like 14-4, and it was just you're just kind of like, dude, I'm looking at some of these guys, and I just think that they're better. Yeah. Like, they are better than us right now. Gerald Henderson made a move where I swear to God he made a spin move and finger rolled it down to the rim. Like, it's like how I remember. I'd love to see the play now because I'm sure he didn't, but it was like that's like the most athletic thing I've ever seen anybody do.
So are you thinking at that point we can't win, or hey, we can win, but we got to play the perfect game?
We can win, but we've got to play so much better, almost to the point of playing the perfect game. And we better start making some shots. And those Duke teams, if you remember, with the way they used to guard, they would just not help, and they would just pressure the hell out of you. And they would take you out of your offense, and you were like, oh, you want to beat us? Beat us one-on-one.
Right.
And I don't know if you see that as much. You didn't see that this year.
No, not from them, but man, Baylor's defense was elite level, and that's what you when I kind of saw their faces and Corey Kispert, it's like, all right, yeah, Corey, you beat Virginia, you beat Iowa, you beat Kansas, like you haven't.
Those teams are not bringing anything close to the level defensively that you're going to see.
Zero. Kispert
Baylor was the best defensive team I saw a year by far.
Yeah.
Outside of the COVID games, I mean, they can pressure you. They've got a dude in Davion Mitchell who would literally just take the ball from you, and he did that in multiple NCAA tournament games where he would just take over and punk dudes. The Nova game stands out, and Nova doesn't turn the ball over. Right. Look at the second half of the Nova game. Literally, they just start turning those dudes over, and just it's off to the races.
A better Marcus Smart.
Yeah, more offensively oriented Marcus Smart.
Yeah, he's got better feel. He's a better shooter. Is
Marcus Smart a little bit bigger than Davion Mitchell?
A little, not a ton. Like, I think Marcus Smart is like 6'3". I think I look right at him. I think he's probably about 6'3".
Right. Yeah, that's fair. And I think Davion Mitchell probably is a more complete offensive player at this point in their careers. But he can go out there and affect the game in a lot of different ways. I think he's a really good leader. And not that he's the leader of the team. Jared Butler, I think all those guys took really good ownership. That was a really
Vital was the emotional leader.
Yeah, and when you would be around those guys, and one of my 4 in-person games in the regular season this year was Baylor, when they would come out for shoot-around or the night before practice, and you were there, they had a real joy about, like, just being together and playing. Yeah. And there's something to be said for that, because I think especially in this year where you're like, man, I haven't hung out with my friends in
that's right
4 months. Right. I haven't seen my parents. I didn't go home for Christmas. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. You know, you could tell they really enjoyed, like, the process of being together and getting better and being around one another every day. And they had a really special group. And I think to culminate that with a national title is really cool, because they're very deserving. They're so deserving. And certainly Gonzaga was too. But at the end of the day, this is what you want, is the 2 best teams playing each other. And Baylor played maybe one of their best games of the season.
So I spent a lot of time with these dudes because David K., their SID, set me up to do this story on how Baylor was built. So I spent like 45 minutes, half an hour with all these guys. And I had talked to Teague and Butler a lot over the years. And I walked away from that just saying, like, I wish I could spend more time in person with these dudes. Like, that's the one part I feel bad about this year, is that we didn't get to know their personalities, or people didn't get to know their personalities because of the COVID shutdown and obviously not having the same level of access as you normally have. So, but these guys, man, like Jared Butler is salt to the earth, Rob, like the best kid you will ever find. And Mark Vital, I want to try to use from that. We did it all through Zoom calls. And his lasted 45 minutes, and we could have kept going, Rob. Yep. It was that good. So I want to ask him if we can use part of it, because he told a story that was fantastic. He said when Scott Drew was recruiting him, he comes from Lake Charles, Louisiana, which is a tough area. It's where our boy Leonard Washington grew up. Yeah. And he said when Scott was recruiting him, he come in his Escalade and he'd get out of the Escalade, he'd roll in, to multiple times into his neighborhood and his school, and he'd come out of his Escalade and he'd start waving at people. And, like, Vital's like, hey, coach, get the hell in the house. Like, get in the house now. And Scott's just out there, doing Scott Drew things of, like, waving at dudes and whatever. And just, again, it's one of the things that I think we should talk about for a minute on this pod, which is Scott Drew and the perception of Scott Drew, not just as a coach, which we've talked about. Okay. He's proven people, I think, now that the dude can coach, right? You win a national title. You hope the perception changes of you. Scott Drew, the person, Rob, I think a lot of people, myself included, when I first met him back in the early 2000s on the recruiting trail, you get it wrong with Scott Drew, because he is such a not half full, glass half full. It's runneth over. Flowing. Yes, it is with optimism. He is the nicest human being in the world. That whole family is, Homer and Bryce included, although Bryce says he's not quite as nice as his brother and his dad in terms of optimism. But ultimately, these guys are like it's almost fake. Like you think it's fake. You really do think it's fake because again of by the way, we got our boy calling us.
Teddy Valentine.
Yeah.
Nice.
We'll talk to him later on the drive.
How the JUCO stuff went. Didn't he ref
right.
the JUCO tournament?
I got to find out how that went, how that JUCO assignment went. Anyway, so Scott Drew, to me, the more you get to know him, the more you realize it's real. Yeah. Like it is absolutely, there is no phoniness in it. He is the nicest human being, the most optimistic, happy. I mean, I talked to him, he hasn't slept. And I talked to him a couple hours ago. He did the Today Show and he got on the phone with me and he would have talked for 20 minutes. But like 5 minutes in, he left off with, hey, and you know, my daughter, you know, not a sports fan until 2 years ago, became a huge sports fan, started doing some media stuff during the pandemic, honestly, to probably keep her busy and keep her engaged and doing things. And the first guy, literally the first coach that saw it and was like, this is the greatest thing ever that she's doing it. Let me know whenever I can be on and she can interview me. And he kept asking and telling me, hey, get Talia to do more. Get her to do more interviews. You and her should do them together on a pod. Like he gets it. He's as hard a worker as he is. And I talked to his family about it last night, his wife, Kelly, and his kids. He works so hard, puts everything he can into his job, but also is so much about family and faith, obviously.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've got a good story about Scott and just like kind of how he is. And this was 2 years ago now. We were doing Baylor, Kansas State in Manhattan. And this was with like the Dean Wade, Kamal Stokes, Barry Brown team. So they were good. And Baylor is in Manhattan and there is a crazy snowstorm coming like overnight or it was overnight. It was going to like roll into the morning. And if you've ever been to Manhattan, the airport is tiny. I cannot imagine that they have like the ability to de-ice planes, or maybe they do. I doubt it though. It's a really small airport. So I've got a flight the next morning, like at 6 a.m. to fly to Chicago. And I've got to drive to Champaign to do a game for Big Ten Network. And that was a Saturday night. This is a Sunday, like at noon start. So I'm cutting it like super close. And my partner, Rich Hollenberg, is got to fly back to Tampa. I think his daughter had like a dance recital or something that he had to be home for. Yeah. So we were talking at shoot around to Scott about it. And he was like, well, we're leaving right after the game. Just hop on our plane and fly back from Dallas. And we were like, can we do that?
Right. It's like, legal. Is it legal?
Is it allowed? And he was like, yeah, let us check it out and make sure that we have room on the plane. But if we do, just fly to Waco, drive to Dallas, and you can get out. And literally, I want to say they lost. And most coaches, after they lose, are like,
they don't want to see you.
Totally. I'm not 100% sure, but I want to say that they lost the game. And Scott was like, I mean, he lets us fly on the plane. And then he asks us if we need a ride to Dallas, as if that's like 10 minutes away. And it's like 3 a.m. He's like, do you guys need a ride to Dallas? And Rich and I are like, no, we'll rent a car and we'll drive. So we got into Dallas at like 3:30 and we were on like 7 o'clock flights, and we both made what we needed to make. But we only got out of there because Scott Drew was like, well, and not that he's paying with his own money for the plane.
Yeah, but still, who's thinking that way?
A lot of coaches will be like, hey, man, that stinks.
Right,
I don't blame them. Like, it's not their job to get us from point A to point B.
But I think it's a lot of the program. I think it starts with Scott, and a lot of people think he's corny. He's maybe not as corny as Josh Pastner, but they're similar in some ways in terms of their positivity, in terms of they are a little bit corny. But I think it works. And you can just see it in a lot of these guys. And now it's going to be interesting, Rob. They've got a couple big-time players coming in next year, like 3 top 75 kids, 2 top 25s that they really like. And again, they've gone the top 10 route in the past, right? They've done that with Quincy Miller, Perry Jones, Isaiah Austin early on in his career and his tenure. But I think now, you find those guys that are a little bit more suited to Baylor.
Better fits,
yes. Yes, better fits. And I I got him ranked like 10 right now.
So who do you think is back for Baylor next year? Butler gone.
Yeah.
I would think Davion Mitchell gone.
Vital's gone, obviously.
Vital's obviously gone.
Teague's gone. And Teague's gone.
And Mason Teague is gone. So like Matt Meyer, Adam Flagler.
They'll
still be good.
Chachua.
Chachua. Yeah.
So they'll still have. And they get 3 guys that they think could all be impact guys next year. Are they going to start off,
They like LJ Cryer a lot too.
Oh, they like him a lot. Right. That'll be key. Yeah. LJ Cryer will be very, very important because if he can be a high-level point guard, and the great thing for him is obviously he's learned this year practicing against Butler, Mitchell, Teague, Flagler. Like that's pretty good. That's pretty. You're not doing better than that, right?
Oh. No, that's certainly gonna teach some things. I think they'll be good. And you're right, the fit is really important. Not that those other guys are bad. Yep. I mean, like Perry Ellis.
Oh no. I mean, Quincy Miller didn't fit, and for them, to me, I always question.
Where do you think Quincy Miller would have fit?
New Mexico State, something like that.
He's the top 10 player.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Like Perry Jones, I love because he was like the sweetest kid in the world. He was just too nice. He was too nice. And obviously Isaiah Austin,
Quincy Miller was really nice too. I blew my shoes out at the NBA Combine, and I'd never met Quincy Miller, and we were in the same group, and he just gave me his shoes.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's impressive. Quincy Miller's problem was he was ranked too high, and he bought into it. Anyway, all right, before we go, let's spend about 3 or 4 minutes on Gonzaga. We've talked exclusively about Baylor so far. Do you question, again, a lot of people now are going to have this kind of mantra of, well, here we go again with Gonzaga. They can never – why are you yawning, Rob? You got plenty of sleep last night.
Trying to get up at 8 to do this with you.
It was the 3-on-3. You had to deal with Titus and Tate all weekend.
That's true. I don't look at Gonzaga and think like – I know the mid-major – or not the mid-major, but the West Coast Conference narrative is going to come back. That didn't affect them against USC, who I thought was playing as well as anybody.
Right.
That didn't affect them. UCLA played the perfect game.
Yep.
The perfect game. And they still beat them.
Yeah.
And, I think maybe that was a little bit of foreshadowing that, maybe Gonzaga is going to have a hard time with Baylor's guards. But they're the second best team in college basketball. And you play who you're supposed to play in your conference. They tried to play all these people. They played Iowa. They tried to play Baylor. Like Mark Few was trying to play whoever he could.
The program's awesome. The program is awesome. Mark Few did a great job. Yeah. They just ran into a buzzsaw.
Baylor was just a better team, and that happens. It's not like you lost to some terrible team in the national championship. You lost to a team that could have easily went undefeated as well in the Big 12. Which is crazy because the Big 12 was so loaded.
Yeah, really good top to bottom. Now the big question obviously will be, again, who comes back? Does Drew Timme come back for Gonzaga? That to me is the big one. Obviously, Suggs and Kispert are gone, and they're going to bring in Chet Holmgren, by the way, who is as fun to watch as just about anybody. The other key for them is, can they get a transfer point guard? Right now, there's a couple of teams that are going to need.
Is Nembhard leaving? Is Nembhard out?
I think he leaves, but maybe I'm wrong. I think it's 50-50 for him and Timme.
And what about Ayayi?
I think he's gone. He was close last year. So I think he's gone. Nembhard should come back. He really should. And to be honest, if he and Timme come back and they add Holmgren, I don't know how you add Walker Kessler too, but that's the word. The word is Holmgren's going to go there. And if Timme leaves, I bet Walker Kessler goes to Gonzaga. If Timme comes back, I don't know how you play those 3 bigs. I don't think you do. But
wouldn't you be walking into the same situation you just left? If you're Walker Kessler doing that?
Right. It would be stupid. Honestly, it wouldn't be smart.
You might as well just stay to Carolina.
Hey, did you have a problem with Timme doing the celebrations last night down 15 before we leave?
I think sometimes it goes both ways. Like, yes, when you're getting your ass whooped and you're like celebrating, it's like when a guy gets a dunk down like 20 into the game and he's like talking shit about it. It's like,
what are you doing?
Yeah. if that's just kind of the way you play and you're a big time player, which he is, he didn't have a big time game, but he is a big time player, and you're trying to get yourself going in any way, shape, or form, if you think that can fire you up or get your guys like maybe out of this shell shocked kind of way that you're playing, then do it. Like, what do you have to lose? But I know that people are gonna look at it the way that they look at guys that, go up and dunk when they're down 30 points and they start talking shit to some dude. I can see where it rubs people the wrong way, but at that point, empty the clip. Whatever you can do to try to jumpstart your group, do it. Like,
that's good. That's a good point. I get it now. I didn't at the time. I was like, come on, man. Like, what are you doing here? Just go play ball. But I understand that if you think that's going to motivate or get you hyped or get your team hyped and get you going in the right direction.
And I have no idea if that's what he was thinking. He literally could have just been like, I've been doing this stuff all tournament. Let's go.
Rob, you need to do that. Hey, can you do that in the 3-on-3 in the Olympics?
I would never grow out a handlebar mustache, nor should I ever grow out a handlebar mustache. So you will not see me do that.
You would look so
pretty weak. It's like fist pumps, and that is all.
You look so cheesy with the handlebar.
I will say though, I was doing a lot of fist pumping yesterday as I shot 76 on the golf course. And
wow,
and my brother.
Very nice.
A lot of Tiger Woods.
Very nice. There. So does this mean we're not getting you back on you're just going to be in the golf course every single day?
I vowed to literally play once yesterday. I might play one more time this week, and then I'm not playing probably until at least post June, maybe till the Olympics.
Really? You don't want to screw up your shot?
It's time to lock in. It's time to lock in.
All right. Well, you lock in. We're still going to try to keep this thing going if we can. We'll figure out maybe based on news. We'll figure it out because you need to see my pretty face every week. Let's be honest.
What would I do without that? I'll bring my mic. I'll bring my mic to wherever I am so we can keep the pod going.
I've brought you plenty of joy this season, haven't I?
Yeah, totally. Tons of joy. Tons of joy.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate it. It's been a heck of a regular season. Certainly one that I think none of us will ever forget.
And hope to never repeat.
Yeah, and maybe we'll try to forget it, but not forget Baylor winning it all because that was one heck of a performance. And again, I think it's changed the perception of Scott Drew, of the program. And again, we'll see you hopefully next week here in the Goodman Hummel podcast.